time. Prophetically, it is running out, and the days are being shortened for the elect's sake. But the elect are going to confront some serious obstacles before the second coming of Christ. In 2013, both Human Rights Watch in the United States and the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge in England have voiced their concern over the rise of killer robots. What if they malfunction and go out of control? Robots that can mimic human beings are being created by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency of the United States Department of Defense, that develops new technologies for the United States military to be used in current and future warfare. One of these inventions is the Sand Flea, an 11-pound robot that can jump 30 feet into the air to overcome obstacles and is equipped with an infrared camera. The 20th century was the most violent in human history due to wars, and sadly many of these wars have continued into the 21st. Some have ended, such as the Tamil Tiger Wars in Sri Lanka. Others are spiraling out of control, like the drug wars in Mexico. North Korea is the most militarized country on earth. But the United States, an ally of South Korea, seems like it is going to wage war against it in the not too distant future. With the extended arm of the United States military, propaganda, Hollywood, giving us an insight into their anti-North Korean agenda. Do we need more wars? But there is another war being waged, one that very few are aware of, and is getting so out of hand that even the secular media in both the United States and Britain are now reporting it. The war on Christians. The Armenian genocide has only recently come to public attention. Ottoman Turkey's attempt to exterminate an entire Christian race in the Middle East, the Armenians, descended from the residents of the ancient Urartu, became the first Christian nation when their king Durat converted from paganism in AD 301. Is a history of almost unrelieved horror at the hands of Turkish policemen and soldiers and Kurdish tribesmen. The first Holocaust of the 20th century that took the lives of 1.5 million Armenians, that spared neither age nor gender, has been overshadowed by the Jewish Holocaust. But in the 21st century, all over the world, in both secular, religious, democratic, or authoritarian states, Jesus Christ's precious flock is being targeted, hunted down, mercilessly killed, and even framed. When China became a communist state, Christians were one of the groups who became a target, and many churches still operate underground. In predominantly Buddhist Burma, the Chin, a predominantly Christian ethnic group, have been unfairly targeted by the military, and sadly not even babies are spared. Indonesia is the highest populated Muslim country in the world, and radicals have targeted Christians by either shooting them in their face, burning them, or attacking innocent schoolchildren with machetes, where 1 out of 4 survived in 2005 and is now living in complete fear. In Egypt in 2010 was the Arab Spring that was to give free elections, free speech, and other cherished freedoms. But the Saudis suspected it was motivated by outside influence, the West. The country's leading clerics have warned against the evils of the regional unrest, which they say was incited by foreigners to foment instability in Muslim countries. Why was the now retired United States Joint Chief of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen doing with the Egyptian Armed Forces Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Sami Inan in Cairo in 2010? Hosni Mubarak, one of the United States' strongest allies in the Arab world, was overthrown. But was there a change, and who replaced him? The Western-educated Mohammed Morsi, who is a member of the radical Muslim Brotherhood, another Western ally. The West praised him, and many Egyptians were happy, but not everybody was celebrating. The country's large Christian minority are apprehensive of a Brotherhood president. They fear restrictions on personal freedoms or rise in discrimination. Morsi promised the Coptic Christian community that they would receive fair treatment under his leadership. But since the Arab Spring till now, the Coptic Christians and their churches have been attacked, which is hypocritical of this Muslim nation who claim they want equal rights, but attack a minority. This is an ongoing global war that will never cease. In each one of us, there is a deep longing for truth. And in my search for truth, I wanted to see what takes place behind the scenes in world events. What are wars really about? Are they about religion or geopolitics? I opened up my Bible and I found a text in John chapter 13 and verse 19. And Jesus says, listen, if you want to know if I'm authentic or not, if I'm real, if I show you something before it happens, when it comes to pass, you will know if I'm real or not. So I started to go through the scriptures and I saw how the Bible prophesied the rise and fall of world empires. But specifically, it guides you to the very last generation of this earth and what they'll experience, especially wars. In this last documentary, we're going to see one of the most unreported conflicts in the world and the build-up to it. John Fox was a 16th century English chronicler who had access to 223 authentic documents that included private manuscripts and episcopal registers, and in his famous Book of Martyrs, he documented Christian persecution from the days of the apostle to his day. The arena was not just for gladiators alone. They were also for the entertainment of the day, Christian persecution. The first head of state to introduce this was Nero, the most hated of the Roman Caesars. He was succeeded by other Roman emperors who also wanted to purge Christians out of the empire. It was only Antonius Pius who didn't engage in this. He was fair and tolerant. But after Emperor Constantine officially stopped persecution, it was to be revived again, this time not by the emperors, but by the popes in the headquarters of the Catholic Church, Vatican City. The popes claimed to be successors of Peter, but if you look around the Vatican, each pope is titled Pontificus Maximus, which means the bridge builder, a title first used by Julius Caesar. Pope Innocent III turned the papacy into a system of war, and he appointed Dominic to start that bloody inquisition to purge anything that dissented not from the Bible but from the authority of the popes. And innocent Christians were killed, but there was one group that was unfairly targeted. The northern part of Italy in the Alpine mountains once lived a people who have been lost to history. They were called the Israeli Alps, or the Vaudois, the people of the valley. His Anglicized form is Waldenses, and one of the descendants recorded the plight of his forefathers. From the year 1485 until the Edict of Emancipation, February 17, 1848, they were almost under constant persecutions, although the sword, the fag and the stake had largely ceased to be used as instruments of their destruction after the year 1730. There are still some monuments in northern Italy left that records this people's uncompromising and heroic history. Their logo translated into English is light shining in darkness. Though they were based in Italy, they had missionaries all over the European continent. Their most famous converts was a wealthy French merchant, Peter Waldo, who used his vast wealth to distribute Bibles in the valleys, and the pastor and soldier, Henry Arnaud. From the 12th to the 19th century, the Catholic Church attempted to ethnically cleanse them so there would be no trace of primitive Christianity. So in our time, the Catholic Church looked like the only one and true church. One man caught wind of this. He is the most controversial figure in English history, the Lord Protector, Oliver Cromwell. He had a meeting with his Secretary of State, poet John Milton, and other men in his government about the Easter massacre of the Waldenses in 1655, and he sent an envoy, Samuel Morland, to Italy to record what had happened. A woman with a spear through her genitals, another being roasted alive, men having their heads blown off by gunpowder, and babies being hacked to death. 20 years later, in 1685, King Louis XIV received some bloodthirsty advice from his Jesuit confessor to purge the French kingdom of Protestants. He revoked the religious liberty law, the Edict of Nantes, and massacred Protestants in his country, but he extended it to his neighbouring country, Italy. He pressured Victor Amadeus, the Duke of Savoy, who was on good terms with the Waldenses, to kill them, and thousands were hunted and massacred. But those who survived, what happened to them? J.A. Wiley tells us. He says, all of the Waldensian race that remained from the sword of the executioner were immured in the dungeons of Piedmont, and how they treated in prison as the African slave was treated in the Middle Passage. When blacks were kidnapped from Africa, some were traded by their own people. But when they were on the ships, they were not only humiliated, but packed like sardines, where they slept, ate, urinated and pooped in the same place. This is what happened on the Waldenses in 1685. A museum has been erected in their honor. But some may wonder, why would people go to great lengths to massacre others who profess to believe in God? Jesus tells us why. They shall put you out of the synagogues, yea, the time cometh, that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God's service. The Union Jack is a combination of the English and Scottish flag, two countries that united as a result of the Reformation. What was the Reformation and where did it begin? Wiley tells us. England is the first of the European communities to flee from the prison house in which the crown priest of the Seven Hills had shut up the nations. England comes forth the first of the nations led on by Wycliffe. John Wycliffe was known as the Morning Star of the Reformation and the Evangelical Doctor. This Oxford professor was a teacher, political reformer, preacher, patriot, champion of theological and practical reforms, who was skilled in the law of optics, chemical analysis, physiological genesis of sleep, geometrical rules, and national economies. He committed a big crime in 14th century England. He translated the Bible from Latin to English for the common man to read for himself, and as he had powerful friends such as John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, he couldn't be touched. Today, in our modern world, if we have the luxury of a smartphone, we can download the whole Bible in just a matter of seconds, which costs near to nothing. In Wycliffe's day, he didn't have that advantage. Neither did he have the printing press of the 15th century that was introduced by Lawrence Coster on the left and John Gutenberg on the right. He had to translate from hand, and he trained young men who were known as Lollards or Wycliffites to preach around the British Isles the simplicity of the gospel, where even the nobility had the privilege of reading for themselves. Wycliffe's disciples spread rapidly throughout Britain, and men boldly preached, not for fame like preached of today, but for the love of the people. But men in darkness feared the light. An army started to gather under the leadership of King Henry IV, and prayer meetings were forcefully invaded and broken up. Bibles had to be handed over to the clergy, and men were arrested for having Bible studies. And under this king, men were burnt to death who wanted to exercise liberty of conscience. Hardly any of the English know this part of their history. In 1414, the reading of the English scriptures was forbidden upon pain of forfeiture of land, cattle, life, and goods from their heirs forever. At the Council of Constance, Wycliffe and his biblical teachings were condemned, and men who were influenced by them, such as the Czechoslovakian reformer John Huss, was condemned to death, and all of Wycliffe's writing which had spread around Europe. In modern Britain, we are seeing very stealthily similar things happen. In 2006, when you strike at civil liberties, such as the Terrorism Act, then religious liberties will be shortly targeted. A person who uses threatening words or behavior or displays any written material which is threatening is guilty of an offense if he intends thereby to stir up religious hatred. A consul may arrest without warrant anyone he reasonably suspects is committing an offense under this section. A person who publishes or distributes written material which is threatening is guilty of an offense if he intends thereby to stir up religious hatred. A person who distributes or shows or plays a recording of visual images or sounds which are threatening is guilty of an offense if he intends thereby to stir up religious hatred. We can see where this is going. Even in the United States, which is called the land of the free and the home of the brave, similar things are happening. Roger Williams, who founded the state of Rhode Island, introduced that state to have civil and religious liberties, and Isaac Backus, the Baptist, pushed for civil and religious liberties. But now the United States is targeting both civil and religious liberties, where the FBI spells out who are the most dangerous groups in North America. Anti-government conspiracy theories, it says, and end times prophecies could motivate extremist individuals. And a recent army training manual ranks evangelical Christians on a par with Al-Qaeda, a shadow of things to come. Sir John Oldcastle, Lord Cobham, was one of the many nobility who embraced the Bible over the authority of the Catholic Church, which showed how far Wycliffe's influence went. It cost him his life. He was burnt alive, and many were burnt for accepting the authority of the Bible over the authority of the Church. Under pressure, many recanted and submitted their conscience to the Church. The residence of the head of the Church of England was once a place of cruelty to the Lollards, Wycliffe's disciples. But why do hardly any English know this history? Where is it gone? Wiley tells us, the names of many of these early sufferers, to whom England owes under providence its liberties and its scriptural religion, have fallen into oblivion. Their memory is preserved in stone, and their names are recorded in heaven. If you're ever to pay a visit to Vatican City, you would never think that it has murdered millions of professed Christians throughout its history. And many would think that it was absolutely absurd that behind these walls a scheme is being hatched for total subjugation of the entire planet. The Bible calls it the mark of the beast, but most of the world better know it as the New World Order. The Vatican has openly declared it wants to control the New World Order in a book called The Keys of This Blood, written in 1990. In 2004, the late Pope John Paul II said we need a New World Order. The following year, in 2005, his successor said the same thing. In 2009, he again repeated in his papal encyclical letter, Charity in Truth. In 2011, the Vatican again called for a global government, and the last Pope emphasized it again in 2012. She is open in her plans, but the world can't see. Let's see how she plans to implement this. She will encourage all the world's major religions to come together and coexist and put away all their differences. This is known as interfaithism, to make the world a better place, where she'll obviously will lead. And the religions are sadly falling for the bait, especially one of her oldest foes, Anglicanism, who separated from in 1534. The Anglican Church has been making frequent visits to the Vatican, and they welcomed the last Pope like a celebrity when he came to England in September 2010. Do these men actually know their own history? On St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, England, there are names of those who are martyrs so these Anglicans could have their freedom today. John Rogers, the Bible translator. Hugh Latimer, chaplain to King Edward VI. Nicholas Ridley, Bishop of London, burned at the stake in Oxford. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. And what is so sad is that British historians are trying to sympathise with Bloody Mary, the murder of these 288 Protestants. But these heads of the Anglican Church, while compromising their position, were about to be in for a shock. For only those with spiritual spectacles will see that in time, the papacy would show her true colours, and that's exactly what she did in the year 2000. In March 2000, the Pope apologised for the evils of the Catholic Church, and Christians put down their guard. But 6 months later, she wrote Dominus Jesus, which said all Christian churches are false, fake, fraudulent, and that she is the only true church and the mother of all churches. The Anglicans lashed out, but it was of no use, for in 2007, the papacy repeated it again, which angered these naive Protestants. But if you ever visit the oldest Catholic church in the world in Rome, St. John's Lateran, on the wall she has inscribed Ecclesia Mater, the mother of all churches, exactly what Revelation said she would describe herself as. The papacy will dumb down the Bible by putting it on an equal par with secular paganism, and even bless those who have a pagan world view, and via the power of political correctness, to merge all cultures together, she will encourage individualism to be crushed. Paganism, moreover, has but one model for all men. Its aim is to ever crush individuality and mold all characters alike. The papacy emphasizes in the book documented Ecclesiastical Megalomania, where in Centesimus Annus, Pope John Paul II says clearly, even in the Centesimus Animus, the Pope reaffirmed the hostility of the Roman Church state to individualism. In order to overcome today's widespread individualistic mentality, what is required is a concrete commitment to solidarity and charity. In Obama's re-election speech in Chicago 2012, he subtly reiterates Catholic social teaching by saying that we are no longer individuals, but a collective.
Than the sum of our individual ambitions, and we remain more than a collection of red states and blue states. We are and forever will be the United States of America, and together.
Who exactly is Barack Hussein Obama? And how did he inherit 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? He has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize while inheriting 2 wars and finishing the last building blocks of a global government, where he signed a law where the United States can detain anyone it suspects of terrorism indefinitely. He was financed by the Billionaires Club that included his distant cousin on his mother's side, Warren Buffett. Some say that he is a disciple of the teachings of the father of community organizing, Jewish socialist Saul Alinsky, and say he has a communist agenda. Others accuse him of being a closet homosexual. And some say he is a secret Muslim, which he mocks at in his 2013 White House correspondent dinner.
These days I look in the mirror and I have to admit, I'm not the strapping young Muslim socialist that I used to be.
But who developed Obama's earliest years of education? As a child in Indonesia, Obama's Muslim father enrolled him in a Catholic school for a few years. Obama had been influenced by Catholic social service programs, particularly when he worked with Catholic-funded programs as a community organizer in Chicago. Obama was invited to receive an honorary degree at the leading Catholic university, Notre Dame. The Catholic Church had been awarding him and steering him throughout his life. But how did he become the 44th Commander-in-Chief of the United States? In April 2008, the last Pope Benedict XVI made a trip to the United States to obviously influence the US elections, but not everyone was impressed. The US Border Patrol complained that the Catholic Church was using her churches as asylum for illegal immigrants, and in the USA Today, it documented that the Vatican was donating $20,000 to assist illegal immigrants across the Texas-US border, which is a felon, and one film trailer verifies this.
I took a vow of peace. And now you want me to help you kill all these men?
Yes, Padre.
I'll see what I can do.
The reality is that America is changing. By the end of this century, a majority of the people will trace their origins not to Europe, but to Latin America.
The Hispanics sincerely want a better life for themselves and their families, but the Vatican exploits them for their own self-interest under the guise of humanitarianism, to flood North America with Catholic immigrants where their huge numbers will decide who will win the United States presidency. President Obama was fully aware of this, and during his 2012 presidential election campaign, he appointed some of the most influential Hispanics in the entertainment industry to use their good looks and their influence to campaign on his behalf. The Catholic press in Britain made it pretty clear that Obama's destiny was in their hands. And in both 2008 and in 2012, Obama won a landslide victory during the US elections. He also appointed a Hispanic to the United States Supreme Court, making it the first predominantly Roman Catholic court in US history, 6 out of the 9. When he signed the Patient Protection and Affordable Act in 2010, better known as Obamacare, on the surface, the Catholic Church in North America produced a voting video called Test of Fire in 2012, which looked like it opposed Obama and his infringement on religious liberties, forcing the churches to act against their own conscience, where the clergy was leading out in the protest. But John G. Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and most of the Catholic high echelons of the court supported Obamacare. The Vatican and the United States have strengthened their relationship, and this union is going to have repercussions for the world in the not too distant future. Who would have ever thought that the world would praise a Jesuit? As the papacy's global influence expands, where its diplomacy is one of the largest on earth, only those who sincerely, with an open mind, study the prophecies in both Daniel and the Revelation will know her future plans of total world domination before the second coming. Open that book, read and judge for yourselves. Read especially the closing pages of that book, and clearing away the glosses and conceits of dilettante apocalypses, judge for yourselves what system it is that there looks you in the face. The cause of God on earth has still its center in the great battle not yet fought out between Christ and Antichrist, betwixt Protestant truth and Popish idolatry. This is the conflict of the ages, the faith and patience of the saints. We live in what is called the information age, but it can sometimes be quite difficult to get the right information, especially when the corporate-controlled media is giving us complete lies and fabricating truths about a region in the world. And what makes it even more frustrating is even when the church keeps quiet. My advice to you as individuals is everything that you've seen in these 11 episodes, please go and research it for yourselves, whether you are a Christian or not. But my obligation and duty is to show you these truths. You may laugh, mock, criticize, think it's absolutely ridiculous, but you have been told. If life is spared, a DVD will be shortly following this. And in the meantime, you can follow even at the doors by clicking on the subscribe on the YouTube or by following myself on Facebook. I hope that what you've been observing has been a blessing to yourself. In the meantime, Maranatha, which means the Lord is coming.
He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still.